All right, we got a lot to get to today. Quit farting around. Cue theme music. 2, 3, 4. Hi, my name is Jimmy. I went to the comic book store. Picks of the week. I'm in a weird mood today. I was in kind of a giggly, goofy mood, and then I came home. My neighbors suck. I park 3 blocks away from my own apartment. But now I'm feeling goofy again. Also, my teeth hurt. All right. So this week, yeah, we'll start with this one. First up, I got Marvel's voices, indigenous voices. Semicolon, voices, colon, voice of America. All right. As this implies, these are funny books done by peoples of the indigenous nations, the First Nations, as our Canadian neighbors call them. And aside from, I have what I would term the standard white liberal interest in Native American culture. I've read Scalped in its entirety. And, I'm uncomfortable with how much I like Western movies. But, now here's the thing. This comic is very much, as its critics will probably tell you, very much a diversity hire. Very much Marvel trying to solidify their position as a corporation that you can give your money to regardless of your skin color. Now, a more cynical fella such as myself, as a younger man, would have held his nose at such a thing. But I've definitely, we can all relax, I've come around on the affirmative action thing. Hey, make sure, call up the NAACP and tell them that. I'm cool with the and also tell them using colored is not, it's not the preferred nomenclature. All right, I'm kidding around. My point is this. A lot of wags will, and, I'm not a saint in this, will see books like this and be like, well, why don't they just give spotlight to actual talented people regardless of their skin color? Which I say, yeah, that would be great if we were living in a fantasy fairyland where everything's always been fair. And I think even as a dumb white liberal guy, I've never really been able to wrap my head around that particular. So starting from now, everything's fair. Like, that's not how that works. It's not tit for tat at all, obviously. But I think stuff like this is Marvel. Yeah, okay, they're trying to make more money. But, I mean, shit. If the profit motive is what's going to get corporations to treat people like people, it's similar to when a guy goes to prison and finds Jesus. I'm not a big fan of organized religion, but if it's going to keep somebody from raping and murdering, it's kind of hard to argue with those results. So in summation, this comic book will prevent rape and murder. I'd like to talk more about, I'm honestly, the main reason I'm uncomfortable with is because I used to date a Native American lady. It did not end well. History taught us nothing. But I also wanted to the cover. So this is a variant cover, and this is something I've actually been meaning to bring up. I've been really waiting for the right time to tell you guys. Variant edition. So if you're not as well steeped in comic book collecting as I have found myself, there's 2 kinds of variants. There's a variant where the retailer has to order a certain amount of the regular cover, say, depending on how rare the variant is going to be. I mean, there's some variants where a retailer has to order like 500 copies of something, which, believe it or don't, will happen. And those variants tend to get, marked up immediately. When at the shop I used to work at, we would get them in and we would immediately price them at like $10 a pop or whatever it was. That was like a standard rate. And, but then there's these, which are basically just a 1-for-1. So I don't know why they call these variants when they should just be called alternative covers. Because they're not, they are variant, obviously, but they're variant kind of implies that it's worth something. Now, the reason I went with this instead of a regular cover or the other variant cover, which I obviously can't show you, is this is Mirage from the New Mutants. And I, I went and saw the New Mutants movie, and it wasn't great, but I enjoyed it. It was kind of a drag because in order to not see the ending coming from the opening credits, you had to have never read the New Mutants before. So, oh boy, I got belly laughs today. Anyway, this is a fucking, look at how good that cover is, though. It's kind of a Disney-fied version of, oh, is that Adam Hughes? That would explain it. Actually, I should look this up. The other cover was by David Mack, and it was, I'm pretty sure the cover was of the character Echo, which is the character David Mack created for the Marvel Universe. I think the only one he's created for the Marvel Universe. I'm trying to see the variant cover. Afua Richardson, whose work I am not familiar with at all. But excellent cover, and the David Mack cover was really pretty too, but David Mack is a brilliant artist, but there's something about his stuff is almost too nice for me to enjoy. I have a similar feeling about Alex Ross, although they're two completely different artists. Sometimes I feel like the more like fine art a comic book looks, the less I can really enjoy it, that sounds like something a dummy would say. Well, case closed. All right, this week I got Barbalian Red Planet #1. Hot dim. Take that again. Hot damn. All right. It's another Black Hammer book. So this is Barbalian is an analog for the Martian Manhunter, and he's also a gay. We're very diverse this week. Well, I told you I'm a guilty white liberal. I'm also, I've been excited for this because they've been running house ads for a while. But what I hadn't realized, I'm talking so fast because I'm having a second cup of coffee. Jimmy never had a second cup of coffee at home. This is drawn by Gabriel Hernandez Walta, who drew, amongst other things, he drew Cullen Bunn's Magneto series from 2014, around in there, 2015 maybe. And then he drew Tom Taylor's critically and fanly acclaimed Mr. Miracle book that he did in 2018, I want to say. Maybe 2017 into 2018. And I don't think this will come as a shock. One of my favorites, because I'm very excited. So that'll be fun. I don't know what from when I showed you guys Colonel Weird Cosmagog #1, I could kind of parse out what the book was going to be about from the cover. But I don't, as Barbalian in the Black Hammer series didn't have a whole lot to do. He was a gay character in the only gay character in the book, to my recollection, and that storyline was great. It just wasn't. It wasn't as central to the storyline. So, like, I remember from the original Black Hammer series, which is only a couple years old, is it? Look up Black Hammer. Like Abraham Slam's storyline is kind of front and center. He's like the point of view character. And then like Colonel Weird's storyline and the lady who lives in the swamp, what's her name? Ugh. Their stories are central to the whole Black Hammer series. Barbalian's story is not so much. This is not the Barbalian book. But that'll be good. Because it's Walta and it's Black Hammer and I love it. And then finally I got this little book called Blood Like Garnets by Lee Harlan. I did not look closely enough. This is actually a prose book. I thought it was a funny book because it was published by TKO, who, as I've mentioned before, is my new favorite publisher, the newest favorite publisher of mine. And so this was in my bag, and I asked Warren, I was like, did I order this? And he goes, oh, it's TKO. And I went, oh, right, because I told him, like, I have a standing order for anything TKO puts out. So I probably won't read this by next week because I've got a lot of other stuff. Like, I got my book club to take care of and stuff. Don't worry about it. Oh, wait, that was Picks of the Week. Where's the sign? Where is the sign? I saw the sign. Hey, what's up? It's the 90s. Where did I do with those goddamn boards? This is just weird. You guys saw me pick them up, right? Oh, man. I'm on the clock here. Where the... Well, this is just embarrassing now. All right, Picks of the Week. I feel like this is something I'm doing constantly now, is I will put something down where I don't normally, And as I'm doing so, my head will go, "You're not going to remember that that's there." And I'll go, pipe down, you. And then, of course, I don't remember that it's there. That was Picks of the Week. But. And now picks of last week. Picks for last week. Picks of last week? Whatever. Look, this is going to be another 20-minute episode. I don't know what to tell you. Because I know I only had one thing last week that I had picked. But I read a ton of stuff. I finally got mostly caught up on all the... I was like 3 weeks behind. Now I'm all caught up with the exception of we only find them when they're dead. And then I have the rest of this week's books to get to. But I read I read all the weeklies. And I got I got some other crap here. It's been a pretty good week for comic book reading, though. I've been really enjoying it, and I'm saving the best for last. And I'm probably the only one who's this excited, but it's okay. I am on the clock. That wasn't bullshit. All right, so all right. So last week I showed you this Taskmaster #1. This was a hell of a lot of fun. Jed MacKay definitely writes like a TV writer. A lot of in fact, most mainstream comic books are nowadays, really probably for the last 10 years, have been written clearly with an eye towards developing it as a television series or film franchise, and the Taskmaster is no different. I don't know that, like, judging from his very brief appearances in the Black Widow trailer, open parenthesis S, close parenthesis, I don't know that Taskmaster will be quite the breakout character that Marvel might be hoping for. Because I thought they might do that with Crossbones in Winter Soldier, but then the Winter Soldier, oddly enough, ended up being the character of focus in that film. And poor Crossbones, man, good old Brock. Anyway, Crossbones was a minor villain that got shellacked in one of those movies really quickly. He pops up, I think, at the end of Age of Ultron, and then he's at the beginning of... No, I think it was the other way around. He was in... What was before? Iron Man 3? Sorry. I'm just trying to remember the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thrill, as he tries to remember a thing. So, I also forgot that So, for years, to my recollection, Taskmaster was never named. He was always just Taskmaster. And then he got his own limited series a while back. Not super long ago, but not, yesterday either. And they finally gave him... They did the same with Bullseye. Bullseye didn't have a name. The Joker still doesn't even really have a name. A lot of these villains, they're just like, he's a villain. What do you want? Taskmaster's birth name, Anthony Masters. And he goes by Tony. Tony Masters, the Taskmaster. You know what? Sometimes... I'm going to sell all my comic books. Does anybody want to buy them? This is my niece when she was 3. Before she... could back talk. Oh, this is another one I read last. Oh, so this was fun. I don't think I had anything much else to say on this. It was a lot of fun though. Like, it was the first book I read this week. And yes, right. So it centers around Maria Hill of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been killed, and Taskmaster is the prime suspect. And, his character, it's always, that's something I do like about Taskmaster, and that it did occur to me while I was reading this. When they first introduced Taskmaster in the 70s, I want to say, and when they would use him a lot in the 80s when I was a little kid, and I couldn't get enough of him. He's got a skull for a face. But I was 11, and that was really all I needed was, skull faces. It's a ridiculous concept, and it's a ridiculous design for a costume, and then... But I didn't know that at 11, nor did any of the grown men who were creating these comic books for me. But as I aged, and especially when your average comic book writer became closer to my age, they started playing up characters like Taskmaster for laughs, and it's great. MODOK has become ironic now. There was a whole series called The Deadly Foes of Spider-Man. No, The Deadly Foes of Spider-Man was a series from when I was a kid. And then there was also The Lethal Foes of Spider-Man. But then Nick Spencer did one, Nick Spencer, who's currently the head Spider-Man writer, called like the something or other Foes of Spider-Man. Like the incompetent Foes of Spider-Man or something like that. Maybe that's just what it was. And it was like Boomerang. It centered around Boomerang, another goofy character that they started playing up for laughs. And with a bunch of other C-list villains like Speed Demon and... Whirlwind, I think, was on. It was the new Sinister Six, but there was only 4 of them. That's my favorite joke of the whole series. Why did I get off on this tangent? Oh, right, because I do kind of miss, like, big, scary MODOK, but it's a ridiculous conceit. It's a giant head with arms coming out of his, where here on his head. It's so stupid. So I get why they play it up for laughs. And if I get nostalgic for MODOK being taken seriously, I can always go back and read Bronze Age stuff when they did take it seriously. Ugh. Anyway, how have you been? Also this week, this is why I wanted to bring up variants. This next book, I had totally forgotten about this. I would have talked about it, I think, last week, had I remembered. I think it was from last week. This is Sweet Tooth, The Return, #1, by Jeff Lemire, who does Black Hammer, who writes Black Hammer. He doesn't draw it so much anymore. He is not drawing this. Sweet Tooth was the book that kind of... Let me think of how I want to say this. Oh yeah, Jeff Lemire is the artist, and Jose Villarrubia is the colorist. Sweet Tooth sort of officially made Jeff Lemire. By the time he got to Vertigo, which is who publishes this, which is an imprint of Detective Comics, guys like me, who also read a lot of indie stuff, were already well aware of him because he had done the Essex County trilogy, which, for my money, remains one of his best works, and honestly one of the best comic books ever made. If you ever get a chance to read the Essex County trilogy, I highly recommend you take it. So he was a critical and indie darling, and then Sweet Tooth was his first job for DC, I believe. And it was really good. It was a post-apocalypse story about a boy who has antlers. It takes place after the apocalypse. There's only a few people left. And all the children started growing antlers and shit like that, but then they all perished, so Sweet Tooth here is the only one left. So it becomes very much this... And this is a theme that Lemire returns to constantly. You see it pop up in Essex County, but then it's very much front and center in Sweet Tooth. It's very much front and center in Descender. It's very much front and center in Ascender. So, like, he writes a lot about this sort of thing. Royal City kind of had a similar thing, although in Royal City the child character was not alive. But he still made it work. It's really good. Jeff Lemire is very good at writing stories about families, and since he's my age, like, Royal City was all set in the early to mid 90s when I was in high school. So, like, the point of view character is also a teenager, and so, yeah, obviously it rings true. So I honestly had no idea they were even doing another Sweet Tooth series. I don't know if it's going to be ongoing or just a mini or what. This is the variant, though, and it's drawn by Jim Lee. And Jim Lee is, famous in comic book circles. He's, like, one of the biggest. He's co-publisher of DC Comics, although that's probably going to change. And he started out as an artist on the Uncanny X-Men, again, when I was a boy, when I was in 6th grade. And he just became a rock star, and he was one of the founders of Image Comics, and blah, 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 blah. He sucks at drawing Sweet Tooth. I think he's a good artist, even though I'm not as into that look as I used to be. But of all those guys, Liefeld and McFarlane and Larson and all those guys, Jim Lee remains to me like the most talented of them. And he's certainly the one that, maybe Larson aside, who actually gives a shit about comics. McFarlane and Liefeld bailed on comics as soon as they cashed out, which is their right. Oh boy, it's going to be more than 20 minutes. Are you guys ready for this half-hour edition? See if I care. I recently switched to coffee with twice as much caffeine in it, and I don't think it's affecting me at all! I also read Year Zero, Volume 2, #1. Holy poop. So, I probably won't mention this again, but you should just go out and read Year Zero. The first series should be collected into a trade, and he's doing the exact same thing. 4 completely disparate characters in 4 completely disparate parts of the world, all dealing with the zombie apocalypse. This one's even more bananas. Like the last one, you had a Yakuza hitman versus the zombies, and then you had recently freed prisoners of war in Afghanistan versus the zombies. It's nuts. So this one you got a captain of a boat captain, another word, And then a couple others. I don't remember. Fun stuff, though. Great stuff. Zombie stuff is coming back, ironically. This is another one. I just got really excited about some of these, so I just wanted to talk about them. I didn't realize it was going to take me most of the day. This is a mini, I think it's a mini anyway, limited series called Wolverine Black, White, and Blood. I guess black, white, and red all over would have been too stupid. It's a black and white series, as it might imply. It's an anthology series, so it's short stories that are self-contained and, you know, take place throughout Wolverine's 200-year history, canonically speaking. And it's a lot of fun. And it's Jerry Duggan, Declan Shalvey. I thought there was something specific that made me want to, like, talk about it. Or it might have just been that it was very kind of return to roots Wolverine type fun stuff. He's a bad ass. Yeah, there's a story that takes place during the Weapon X era. There's a story about him versus Hydra, which is... Oh, yeah, that was the other thing. This is hands down one of the most violent comic books I've read. This might be the most violent comic book I read this year. So if that's the sort of thing you're into, if you really liked... If your favorite part of the film Logan was the first 10-15 minutes, you're gonna want it. And then finally, for the weeklies, I got Thor number 9 here. This is the beginning of a storyline called Prey. This here is Dr. Donald Blake, and I've been super stoked on this because they've been teasing me with this guy. That sounds even gayer than it is. When Thor was first published by the Marvel Comics Group, his very first appearance in Journey into Mystery number 82, I think that's the number, Thor needed to be taught a lesson in humility. So Odin the Allfather bonded him to Dr. Donald Blake, who used a cane, and as he was described all through the Silver Age, was lame. So you had this, limping doctor, but he finds this walking stick, and then when he taps it, it turns into Mjolnir, and he becomes the mighty Thor. So that was the central premise. That was like Thor's secret identity for years and years and years. I think it was certainly by the time I was in high school, they had kind of abandoned that. In the same way that, the Hulk gets mad or Bruce Banner gets mad and becomes the Hulk. That's like the elevator pitch. They abandoned that before I started collecting comics. Like, that hasn't been the log line. I mean, occasionally, like when Bruce Jones was writing it, he kind of went back to that brand of Hulk. But yeah, it's very wide open. Why did I get started on that? Oh, because of Thor. So Don Blake has not been a character in the Marvel Universe for a long time. Jane Foster got to hang out, and she even got to become Thor for a while. So Donny Cates, who is a very sick individual, comes up with really, really just incredible premises. The kinds of like Mark Waid premises where I go, why didn't anybody else think of this? It's been a while since we've seen Don Blake, and we find out where he's been, and oh boy, are we in for it. So that was fun. Now here is the thing that made me go for 25 minutes. This is the Complete Neat Stuff by Peter Bagg. This is a 2-volume clamshell hardcover that's bent to shit and dented up, as you can see. But that's why a $60 slipcase hardcover set cost me $16. Now this book, Peter Bagg is one of my absolute favorite cartoonists, if not my most favorite cartoonist. He's most famous for his book Hate, that featured Buddy Bradley here, who began in the pages of Neat Stuff. I've got another. You can't really see it, but this is Everybody's Stupid Except for Me, which is Peter Bagg's political cartoons. I've got everything. I think I have everything he's done at this point. He did the Vomit Glossary poster, which you may have seen if you were ever in a Spencer's Gifts in the late 80s. And that was the first thing I ever saw of him, and my friend Chuck had it, and I would stare at it in his room for hours. It was the funniest thing I'd ever seen, obviously, but also just the way it was one of the first things where I was like, I think I see how this joke is working. So I reread this whole thing this weekend. In fact, I didn't do other things because I was so excited. It's been so long since I read neat stuff. And when I was in high school, this book ended in 1989, so I had no idea what it even existed until I was in high school. And then I devoured everything I could by Peter Bagge. And it's really uncanny how much his stuff really informs who I am as a person. You know, I don't know if you guys have done this, and I'm really trying not to get nostalgic here in my early middle age, but when I go back and look at stuff from when I was a kid, I just like, oh, that's where I got that from. Like, there's so many little mannerisms and turns of phrase, especially from Peter Bagge, and like, you know, speech patterns. It's crazy. But this is some of the funniest stuff you'll ever read. It ages better than I thought it would, because there's still a couple, you know, there's occasionally a joke that might make that you might not try to attempt this at this point, but it's not like cringingly bad. There's a couple things. But man, it's so good. It really made, it just honestly made me love comic books even more. And it was a magazine, excuse me. It was a magazine-sized comic, and I have some of them, like the original comics. Is Girly Girl. It was like his first breakout character. This is Buddy Bradley. The Bradley family is largely based on Peter Bagge's own family. Appeared in neat stuff, and it was kind of like it was like like a sitcom-y family, but very realistic, and a lot of swearing and fighting and stuff. And then Buddy moved out to Seattle from New Jersey, and that became Hate, which remains one of the best comic. And honestly, like, I can't imagine my son ever giving a poop, but if he ever came to me and said, what was it like being kind of an intolerable hipster in the 90s, I will just have to hand him that comic book, and that will explain everything. You know, when I was a kid, like especially in my 20s and stuff, and I started to notice how much marketing was aimed at my parents' demographic, because they're, or people older than me, certainly, and how all of their high school stuff was being marketed back to them as nostalgia fare. And I was like, what a bunch of pathetic loads. And then Fantagraphics goes, hey, we have a 2-volume. I go, give it to me right now. So I guess it just depends, right? Oh, we all learned something here today, and I think that's the most important thing. You guys, I do apologize for this half-hour edition of Wednesday I'm in Love with your host, Jimmy Calloway, but da-da-ba-ba-di-ba-doo.